The golden hills of Sears Point have long been the site of innovation. Carved into the steep terrain, Sonoma Raceway snakes up inclines, slices through hillsides, and flows with the land. For decades, racing drivers have pushed themselves and their cars to the absolute limit in a relentless pursuit of speed at Sonoma. Nearly 2,000 Silicon Valley companies chase speed in a different way. One of these companies is CrowdStrike, the official internet and cloud security provider of SRO America and the presenting sponsor of the Sonoma Race
Greetings, welcome to beautiful Sonoma.
Speed is key to winning, and so does CrowdStrike. That's why every second counts. CrowdStrike Friends and Family, this is a special stream just for you, featuring our own CrowdStrike and AWS drivers. This is GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS at Sonoma Raceway, sponsored by CrowdStrike. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined today by CJ Moses and Kevin Boehm, both drivers in TC World Challenge America. Welcome, guys. This is a really exciting afternoon. We get to bring not only the race broadcast, but also some really neat technology integrations with P1 TS, and got Ryan Marine joining us down in the pit lane as well, so that's where he is right now with Max Root for Wright Motorsports, but just about to launch GT World Challenge America for 90 minutes at Sonoma.
Great, it's great to be here and great to welcome all of our guests along from CrowdStrike and AWS. We've had a great day already today running in the touring car series, and now we get to see George and Colin go out there and take the battle to the GT class.
And Kevin, welcome as well. You were also out there earlier today, and it's pretty wild. We got 3 classes in your series. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but pretty hot and slick out there from what I was told.
Yeah, today was super fun out there on track. It was a close race for us, and glad to see CJ get up on the podium as well, but I was just off of it, so we got one more race tomorrow for touring cars. We'll try to get up there in my class as well.
And of course, this weekend, with COVID-19, the pandemic right now, everyone's been doing a great job so far with the COVID protocols here at Sonoma Raceway. Everyone's got to wear masks all the time right now. We've got a lot of sanitation going on, and everyone's social distancing, which is easy to do with how beautiful and how big this racetrack really is. It covers a big footprint and leaves plenty of space for everybody.
Yeah, it's been nice. We actually have been able to, the weather's been beautiful. It's warm enough to stay warm, but not too warm that the face mask gets all nasty. So we've actually done pretty good there. In the race car, it's still getting pretty hot. I know Kevin and I both came out pretty well gassed, but now we're here and looking forward to seeing George and Colin go out there and give them some fun.
Absolutely, and so we'll show you guys a recap of what happened yesterday on Friday afternoon. We're right back.
CJ here, live right after I got out of my car in Sonoma after our first race. At the start of the race today, the field jumped away from me just a little bit, and I was able to get back to the pack. All in all, we ended up in 4th place. Pretty decent finish, for my first time here at Sonoma. We look to improve on that. I learned a lot while I was out there, and I'm going to put all that to play tomorrow, and with hopes of making sure that we get on the podium tomorrow. So thank you all for tuning in today. It was great chatting with all of you, and I look forward to being able to do this again tomorrow and give you an update from the podium rather than out here in the park for May.
Hey guys, I'm Kevin Boehm. I'm racing the number 9 TCA Honda Civic with CrowdStrike, and we just got finished with race 1 here at Sonoma, and we were running quite a bit slower than we did in qualifying due to the heat of the track and things like that. So it was a lot of fun out there. I started 3rd and unfortunately fell back to 4th, but we maintained that, and looking forward, I think our lap time will put us 3rd for the start tomorrow. So looking forward for race number 2.
Hi, it's George Kurtz. We are at Sonoma. On Friday, we had practice 1 and 2, and we were P1 for both practices, so I think a pretty good day. We had to make some changes on the car. Pretty low grip today at the racetrack, pretty windy at the moment, which really affects certain turns. But overall, we feel really good, and we'll see what happens in qualifying tomorrow.
Welcome back live, and we're taking a look right now at the Sonoma Raceway track map here, CJ. 2.5 miles of twists and turns, 12 corners, challenging technical, and not a lot of straightaway here. So you're using every little bit of downforce you have in that car, all the brakes at this 2.5 mile track in Northern California.
Yeah, Sonoma is a very twisty track with a lot of elevation change, and that's one of the things that is very challenging because there isn't much room for on a straightaway to take a break. So you're constantly turning. You come down the front straightaway, turn one up the hill, you're still pretty much wide out until you get up to the bridge, braking a little bit, turning into turn two, which is up and over, and it's a blind turn. You can't see where you're going, but you have to be full throttle before you get there. It falls away on the opposite side, so you carry that through up into turn three, from turn three down and back up to 3A. Once again, another blind right-hand turn that you have to be wide open through. Down into turn four, down into second gear, really slow turn, but you still have to accelerate out of that because there's a little bit of a straightaway before you get down into the carousel, into through 5 into 6. Carousel, you have to set up and dive down in deep, get back to the throttle early because this is one of the short shoot straightaways that we have here, going down into 7 and 7A. Through there, it's a low speed turn, but there's a little short shoot straightaway. Back down the S's coming back down the other direction, and through there you're actually going pretty wide out, but you have to manage your tires a bit through there, make sure that you don't overshoot the track and end up into the sand. Going down into the chicane into turn 9, as we call it, you're going pretty fast, and you have to get down to second gear, a hard right-hand turn, very slow speed, then back to the left, pretty much over the berm, the curbing that's there, then flat to the floor, off you go, through turn 10, wide open, third, fourth gear, maxing that out all the way down into turn 11, which is a hard hairpin turn, once again in the second gear, wrapping your way around and taking it back down, up the front straightaway, back under cross start finish. So a lap around Sonoma doesn't leave much for time for breathing. So you just go out there and go as hard as you can. But it is a finesse track, so if you overdrive the car, you'll end up in the sand, and it doesn't go so well. So you have to take your time, but be persistent and make sure that you're hitting all your marks.
And Kevin, I know you've also been out there today in the TCA car. You guys drive very different looking Honda Civics. CJ, obviously in the TCR, the touring car category, you're in TCA. Can you explain the differences between CJ's car and your car, and how that translates to speed on the racetrack?
Well, the TCA car is really based on a street car, so it's modified. It's not exactly stock, but it's got very, very minimal improvements to go racing. So a little bit of the suspension, a little bit of the brakes, just to make the car more durable, and then the roll cage and some safety equipment, and it's basically just like the Civic Si that you may find at a Honda dealership. CJ's car, the TCR Honda, is based loosely on the Honda Civic Type R, and then it's just really turned up to 11. Everything that you can imagine that you want to do to that car: more power, more brakes, wider tires, wider track, lots of extra grip, big aero, big wing, splitter on the front, lots of downforce. It's just a really a Honda Civic turned up to 11, about as much as you can.
And we just saw George Kurtz and Colin Brown's DXTT Racing Mercedes AMG GT3. So we're running the GT class cars today, the GT3 machines homologated across the FIA's and SRO America series here in this country. And obviously the CrowdStrike logo's all over that. So let's talk a little bit about CrowdStrike and AWS, who work together very well and very nicely. And that's the whole reason why we're here this afternoon. AWS is the title presenter for the Global SRO Series, GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. For 13 years, AWS has been the world's most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud platform, offering over 175 fully featured cloud computing services. Last year, the firm entered into a new collaboration that saw AWS become the official cloud machine learning provider for SRO America, as well as a series partner of Pirelli GT4 America and TC America. And I know, CJ, your official title is a lot of words, and we all know that the more words you have in your title, the fancier and more important it is. You're the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer of Amazon Web Services. Can you explain what you do at AWS and how you ended up here?
Sure, absolutely. So essentially that means I'm second in charge of security for the AWS cloud globally. We have regions or locations around the world where we offer essentially 195 plus services that allows businesses as well as individuals to be able to use those services in order to base their businesses on it. So it is our goal to be basically the infrastructure that the internet runs on. And from that, it's my responsibility to secure that infrastructure as well as all those services that run within that environment. So here with the series, one of the big things that we're really really focused on, both us working with CrowdStrike in the SRO, is to showcase those technologies that AWS has, and do so in a way that's engaging with a new vertical, if you will, for the company, as well as engage new customers and help the SRO engage better with its fans. You'll start to see some of those innovations and things that are running in the cloud start to appear here on our streams in the coming shows. So it's one of the things that we're really looking forward is continuing to bring innovation from the cloud into different venues, and motorsports is a perfect way to do so. Working with CrowdStrike from a security perspective allows us, because one of the things that CrowdStrike does is CrowdStrike runs on AWS, but also AWS uses CrowdStrike security software in order to protect the cloud. So we have a great 360 partnership there to allow us to be able to work closely together, both protecting the cloud as well as working here with the SRO in order to protect their data and bring them the innovation that they need.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. So we're pacing now for the start of a 90-minute GT3 racing event here this afternoon. And Kevin, while we're lining up and getting ready to go race, obviously you've had plenty of experience in race cars. You're also a senior engineer at Honda R&D, so you've got some experience working on cars as well and designing them. So that's pretty cool. There is the number 93. That's the Racer's Edge car, driven by Shelby Blackstock and Trent Hinman. It's an Acura NSX GT3. They're on pole today, but 90 minutes. Lap one, what's going through your head as you approach the start finish line?
Well, I mean, every race is the start's the most nervous part, because all the cars are closest together that they're going to be for the entire race, and basically that's the most unpredictable part of the entire race, because everybody's close, and even a small kind of improvement in your line or things like that can be worth 1 or 2 or maybe up to 5 positions. So the main thing you're doing is trying to kind of have a strategy based on whether you're going to start on the inside or the outside of the first turn, and really try to find a way to take advantage of the cars that are around you and use that to gain some position.
So while we wait for the race to start here, if you have any questions for either Kevin or CJ, you can direct those to the Twitter account for CrowdStrike Racing. That's at CrowdStrike RCNG. And you can do hashtag CrowdStrike Racing and ask these guys questions, or you can head straight to the YouTube chat and we'll answer your question right here live on the air as we head down the hill into turn number 5, which we talked about a little bit earlier. But with the pace lap still underway here, guys, double file for the start of this race. I think we've got about 12 cars in this race. There's 2 different categories, but we're just focused on the GT3 Pro-Am for this one and the DT Racing Mercedes AMG GT3s. George Kurtz, Colin Brown in one of them, and David Askew and Ryan Dial in the other in the 63. So 0463, those are the number boards you're looking for on the timing and scoring. Thanks for joining us here on this beautiful afternoon. Sonoma's a really beautiful area. I hearken from Rochester, New York, so that's a little colder up there. And although the summers are pretty, I think Sonoma's been very shocking to me how pretty it is all the time here.
Yeah, the weather here is been amazing. The last race we had was back closer to my home, or actually in Virginia, and that race, it was about 95 degrees, and humidity was a little bit higher than that. I think it was about 98. We were just walking outside out of the air conditioning, you were pretty much soaked. And then getting in the race car was crazy. Here it's been so much nicer that the weather it's sunny and nice, but it's not so hot that you can't enjoy a little bit of racing. So I see that we're getting close to the start here.
Lights have extinguished atop the Acura NSX safety car, and we've got a really cool technology integration from P1TS software here, and we'll bring that to you in just a few minutes. Once we got some drivers on the timing and scoring, we can show you a lot of really cool details about these cars as they make their way around the 2.5-mile Sonoma Raceway here in Sonoma, California. 90 minutes for GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS, sponsored by CrowdStrike. And it's time to go racing in Sonoma. Waiting for the green flag, field double file. Green flag flies, and we're finally racing in GT World Challenge America. The field heads up towards turn 1. The Racer's Edge Acura leads the way as they head for turn 2, the right-hander at the top of the hill, CJ.
Yeah, it looks like they're going single file pretty quickly. It's a good thing. Keeps from having any interaction, but it looks like they're moving on down. They're down in here into turn 3 and coming up to 3A. Looks like they fanned out nicely, so that we shouldn't have any crazy action down here into 4.
And George Kurtz again in that Mercedes AMG GT3, Kevin. And that car is a very torquey car. It's also one of the heavier GT3 cars. How is that going to fare against the rest of the competition at a track as tight and technical as Sonoma?
Well, you really have to kind of be careful with your tires, because if you go and drive as hard as you can right from the first lap, it's pretty easy to kind of use up all the tire too early in the race. So you have to kind of push as hard as you can to stay with the group and maybe try to make some passes, but you also have to be mindful that you don't want to use all your tire too early.
There's also another award out there today. That is the Fastest Lap Award. And that is sponsored by CrowdStrike, because every second counts, guys. And we know that race car drivers like to go fast, so does CrowdStrike. So not only is there a trophy for winning the race today, there's also a nice little bonus for getting the fastest lap. And as they make their way down into 9A, that's that tight little chicane there with the big curve on track out. There is Fuentes in the Ferrari 488 GT3 car in third place right now overall. And in just a moment, we'll show you this P1TS software that allows you to really delve in deep to the details of racing live. And this is one of the cool things. We've got a great show, and we'll show this a little bit more in detail later in each part of this software. But this is a track map that's live right now, showing the positions of all the cars around the racetrack one at a time. And there's the 93 comes across the start-finish line there all by himself, leading the rest of the field as they head up through turn number 2 once again. And there's obviously we can focus on one car in particular. We've got the 04 highlighted, as well as the 93. So you can see them heading up through the first sector here. And Kevin, this is one of these really cool pieces of software that I'm a little bit of a data nerd myself. I come from sim racing broadcasts where we have all this data all the time, but in the real world, it's not quite so easy.
Right. This is pretty fancy. As an engineer, I love technology as well, and normally I'm in the car, so I don't get to see some of this stuff. So it's neat to get to see where the car is on the track kind of live and see what the some of the times are.
And not only this, we also have detailed sector information as well. We're going to wait till the drivers complete a full-timed lap for that. But we'll also have live results and lap times. We can track individual drivers. It's a really cool piece of kit, and we'll get to explore this throughout the rest of the day. But we'll head back live now. There's the number 27 car working his way around turn 7, and I believe that is a GT2 class car that is also out there as well. So there is the 04. That's George Kurtz from DXDT Racing, and chasing one of those Ferraris into the braking zone. And that's a great looking livery on that car, isn't it, Kevin? It's a very sharp looking race car. All the CrowdStrike cars are this weekend.
That's right. It seems like this livery's on the Mercedes and then on CJ and my Civic as well. And it seems like every car you put that livery on, it just looks fantastic.
It really stands out. And CJ, you see them in a battle right now with the Ferrari and another Mercedes in behind them. That's the other DXDT Racing car, so they're both nose to tail as teammates out there. I'm sure you've raced with teammates before. It's something that I think Darrell Waltrip used to call co-opetition. You're both working together for a common cause, but at the same time, you're trying to beat each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, these two cars have been in competition quite a bit. In some cases, a little bit too much, where they've created a little bit of carbon fiber in this case, not necessarily paint. But I'm sure that David and George will work together out there in order to work through there. Actually, they seem to be doing quite well, and I do believe exactly what you're saying is that they're trying to work together in order to move forward, so that George doesn't have to run a defensive line, let David maintain the line and get up there and get past the Ferrari.
So we talked a little bit about TCA and TC, which is or TCR rather, which is what you guys race. But Kevin, what does GT mean, and why is it the top tier class in SRO America series?
So the GT3 cars are kind of like the Civic and the that CJ and myself are running. They're still based on a OEM car. It's just even more so than CJ's TCR car. It's modified even further, so a lot more downforce, a lot more tire on the car, and just a lot of technology inside the car to make it easy to drive. And essentially, these cars, in some cases, they make less power than the road-going versions do, but they're way faster on track because they have so much more grip. So these cars are still based on street cars, but they are kind of lots and lots of technology, carbon fiber and everything put into a really neat package.
So now we've got some lap times on the board. We'll head back to P1TS and show you the lap time chart, and this is a very detailed chart. What lap the driver's on, the lap time that they're running, the gap between the next car. There's so much here, guys, to investigate. And thanks again to Ken Lynn for showing us this and kind of giving me the rundown yesterday on how to use all this. You can see right now this is the overall standings that you're looking at, and we can actually eliminate the different categories of cars and get all the way down to just the GT3 Pro-Am cars, which includes George Kurtz and Askew as well. So they're both 4th and 5th in class right now, but we can go back to overall and show everybody again, and you can easily select this with a click of a button, all synced live, and we can even look. Purple is the best lap that the drivers run so far. And we can really get a detailed look at all this information. We can look at individual sectors for drivers as well. If we wanted to look at George Kurtz, we can pull up his laps and we can look at his sector times, each delta that he's been running, and we can go back to the track and watch him negotiate this in real time with all the traffic around him. And traffic's a discussion in every multi-class racing series. And CJ, I'm sure you had a story about your TCR race this afternoon, working through some of the TCA traffic.
Yeah, it's a bit unnerving in a way, because the last thing you want to do is work through traffic and actually end up in somebody else's race, especially when I'm racing TCR and coming up on some of the TCA traffic. As you're moving up through, you don't want to end up impacting the race of those cars that you're working your way through. And in this case, we have multiple GT classes, GT3, and then we have the Sports Club, which is GT2 and some older GT3 cars that are out there racing. And there is a possibility, or likelihood, in a 90-minute race that the GT3 cars are going to come through the GT Sports Club cars, and they could impact the race, especially a GT2 car, as opposed to a GT3, has a lot more power and a lot less aero, meaning that they don't have as much grip or downforce on the car. In here, that's going to hurt them, especially given the way the track is configured. But in a straight line, they are a good bit faster. So it makes it really hard to pass them. So that's one of the things you look out for here is the Sports Club GT2 cars that are out there. Watch out for GT3 cars trying to get around them, because in a straight line, the GT2 cars are going to be faster, where the GT3 cars will be able to get around them and carving through the turns.
I think one of the interesting things about Sonoma Raceway, Kevin, is how dynamic this track is to watch as a spectator. All the curbing around here, especially at the hairpins, you're jumping those things, and you're maybe not touching them quite so much in a GT3 car as you are in a TCA car. But tell me a little bit about how you attack a racetrack like this, where you've got these tall curbs, those yellow and blue berms that are trying to keep you off the grass.
Well, I mean, when you're trying to go fast at a track like Sonoma, the main thing you want to do with these tight turns is try to make the radius of the turn just a little bit bigger. And what that allows you to do is to carry just a few mile an hour faster through the middle of the turn. And that adds up in all the turns to give you a pretty good lap time. But when you look at
just
the
adding to your conversation about the
a lot of their grip is based on aero. So if you touch some of these really steep curves and lift the car off the ground a little bit, you lose that aero benefit, and you can actually hurt your lap time a lot. So it really depends on what kind of car you're driving and how it makes its grip on whether you can use some of these big curbs or whether you have to avoid them altogether.
It's going to start with a lot of understeer, but they actually think as the stint plays out and the tire wear, especially on the rear, plays out, that the handling might be coming back to them. But really interesting to hear that the two just are going completely different directions, and you might see that play out over the course of a stint, with one car stronger at the beginning and the other towards the end.
We've also noticed that George Kurtz has found his way around one of the Ferraris, and CG, you're just noting how loose that Ferrari looks, a mid-engine platform compared to the front-engine rear-wheel drive platform of the Mercedes. And at a tight technical racetrack like this, that balance change might be a factor here.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see the Ferrari as it came over 3A, as he got the car loose, the rear end was dancing. And the last thing that you actually want to have in a car like this is that it's dancing around, especially going over some of these undulations that you have. Going up turn 1 up the hill, you actually bottom out a little bit on the aero, and if you get that undulation going, you can actually get the car bounced up so that you can't steer it and spin it out. So I'm sure he has his hands full, and with David Askew in the team car of George Kurtz, I think David should be able to catch up and get by that Ferrari here shortly. Looks like he's closing in on him now, going down into 9A.
On the brakes, and these cars also have anti-lock brakes, and Kevin, that's a nice luxury to have as a race car driver. Not everybody in every series gets that, but tell me a little bit about the braking capability, because when I get in a race car as a passenger with some of my buddies, I'm always shocked, maybe not by the power, maybe not by the downforce or the cornering ability, but the brakes are always what surprise me.
Right, the brakes are really a misunderstood part of most cars. I mean, even your average road car, if you convert the braking power that it has into horsepower, even a standard Honda Civic has over 1,000 horsepower in the brakes, even though the engine only makes maybe 150. So it's the brakes are an incredible, powerful part of the car, and then especially with these GT3 cars, because they have so much downforce and the tires are so wide, they have even more. So they're able to brake at a mark that's even later than I can, except they're going way faster before they hit the brake pedal. So these cars, the grip capability that they have is pretty unbelievable.
And there's George Kurtz again. We just noted a little while ago that he had gotten by the Ferrari. If we go back and take a look at P1TS here, and we take a look at the lap times that were just ran, you can see George Kurtz right here with the 142.025 is his best time. His theoretical best time is a 141.955. So that's what he could run if he stitched together a near perfect lap. But you can see that he was a little bit faster the last few times around than the number 24 of Gandor. So that's where this software is very handy, is looking at the speeds of drivers around the people that you're interested in, which in our case is George Kurtz and Askew, and you can see how much quicker that they are running or how much slower they're running, and can kind of plan accordingly. There's also a really neat line that I was told yesterday. You can kind of see this ghosted outline here, this gray outline to either side of the green track map. That is, in theory, how long it would take for a pit stop to happen. So if a driver were to hit pit lane, where the end of that line is, which right now is at the top right corner of your screen, that line is basically where the car would come back out. So this is indispensable information for teams that are looking to kind of plan their strategy around not coming back out into traffic.
Right. The main thing that you're looking for there, if you're the kind of crew chief on one of these cars, is you want that ghosted line to stay ahead of the kind of first place car on the track. You want to come out of pit lane before anyone would pass you, and that way you don't come out in the middle of all the other cars, and that'll allow you to have clean track and be able to put some fast laps down after you come out of pits.
And Kevin, I know you've been a race car driver for a little while, but what brought you into racing? How did you get yourself into it, and how did you end up here today?
I would have to say it was Hot Wheels and Legos.
Okay, me too.
But I think I sometime in high school I went to a kind of a track day and saw some cars driving on track and thought, yeah, that looks like something I want to do, and I've been working towards it for a long time.
That's really interesting. We also see Kurtz closing in on a car that is not actually in his class, but in his overall position. There's Shelby Blackstock, the Racer's Edge Motorsports car. He's actually had experience in TCR in a different series, but moved to the Racer's Edge Acura NSX this season with Trent Hinman as a co-driver. They've had a lot of success so far. I think they won their first race out at COTA earlier this season. So obviously they've got that team all pretty hooked together there, CJ.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good part about that is that Shelby actually, when running the TCR car, actually we share a crew chief. So Cooper King is actually here as my crew chief, supporting us here in the SRO series, while Shelby, when he's running in the other series of TCR. So been able to capitalize on having that knowledge and obviously the background. So we've been pretty fortunate that way.
And just knowing another thing here on the P1TS software, if we go back, we can take a look at these differing lines here, and these are the drivers around what we're looking at. The 04 car, which is Kurtz, is our Y=0, which is basically this line moving over, and everybody around him, the other colored lines are either ahead, which is above, or behind, which is below.
I did check with the team, Gregory Romanelli,
who I think is really interesting, because you can see this represented on a Y graph with seconds either side there, CJ. Again, an indispensable piece of information for teams or even spectators that are kind of curious what's going on out there.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to know if your favorite car is moving forward or is being closed on. And this graph shows you over a period of time, over the laps, what that actually is, and it helps you to also kind of plan forward as far as closing or otherwise.
So as we're looking at the Ferrari jump the curbs there in 9, we're going to head back down to turn 11, which is kind of a traditional passing opportunity here, guys. But how does the chicane, which is we're seeing Kurtz through navigate right now, that's not a layout that is typically run here. This is sort of closer to the IndyCar layout. or instead you'd normally just go through the faster part of the S's and head on straight down to 11. So Kevin, how does that adjust your passing opportunities here? Does it really add a zone, or does it sort of take one away or move it to the other corner instead of being able to use turn 11?
It definitely adds a passing zone there. So every kind of drawn out brake zone is an opportunity for you to potentially brake just a little bit later than the car in front of you, and hopefully basically arrive at the turn before they do, and that's a good way to get a pass done. Without the chicane there, it's really high speed S's, and really you have to follow the car, especially with these GT3 cars with the aero. You have to kind of follow the car ahead of you, because if you kind of get out a little bit wide, you lose so much speed that you lose any advantage before you get to 11 to try to make a pass.
So about 15 minutes into this 90-minute race here, guys, and we've seen the field spread out. And obviously, CJ, as you spread out amongst the racetrack, you go from racing your competitors to racing the track itself. Tell me a little bit about that and how you get yourself into the groove, how you start to focus in on not necessarily the competitors around you, but what your car is doing and how you can improve your driving or maybe find some extra pace.
Yeah, absolutely. You almost go into a quasi-qualifying mode, because during qualifying, the idea is to have a clear track ahead of you. And you just, you've established marks on the track where you know you should be braking, where getting back to the throttle, shifting gears, and you want to be able to go ahead and actually optimize that. You don't have to worry about somebody diving in on you, or otherwise you've got space. And to some extent, at least in my case, one of the things I do like, you have clear track, but you, like here, David Askew has a car in front of him. I like to use the car in front as a rabbit to gauge how well I'm going through turns comparative to that car in front of me, in order to be able to actually close the distance and maybe learn some new things as well as you're going. You do have to adjust for the changing conditions both of the track and of the car, because as we talked about, tire degradation here is huge. And as you go through the 45-minute stint that these cars will have here, towards the end the tires will go off, and you'll have to brake just a little bit earlier in order to hit the same marks. And if you don't, you'll end up off into the dust, and that's never any fun.
So taking another look here at the sector times for George Kurtz, we can really get deep into analyzing consistency here, Kevin, and we can take a look at basically every sector that he's run so far. And sector 1, he's only had a differential of a couple tenths of a second, which is really just a little bit more than a blink of an eye. But you can see, looking up the list from lap 1 all the way to lap 10, which we're on right now, the sector times, and it looks pretty consistent so far. Not a lot of mistakes.
Right, and with these races and these cars, over the 10 laps that we've completed so far, the car isn't going to have changed very much right now. So any of that variance that you see in the times now is kind of just the George having a little bit of variance in his line and little things like that. So as the race gets longer and the tires get more used and the fuel burns off the car and the track temperature changes, there's a lot of variables that will eventually make those times vary just a little bit more.
And we can see those gaps around George increasing. Again, the blue line, the Y = 0 is where George is, but the drivers behind him falling off. That's the 24 car and the sister car, the 63, down about 5.5 seconds behind. As we also continue through this race, talk a little bit about the track degradation a little bit, how the rubbered in line sort of changes the grip, and also marbles offline. I was walking out there yesterday adjusting some banners. There's a lot of rubber off the racetrack, and it looks really slippery out there. So how does that adjust your line throughout the race?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to pretty much stay on line, because what we mean by that is, obviously there's an optimal line for you to drive around the track, and if you get outside of essentially that lane and get into another lane, you're going to have worn tire, we call them marbles, worn tire rubber that balls up offline. And if you get on top of that, your very hot tires grab up those marbles, and before you know it, it feels like you're on snow tires out there. And unfortunately, snow tires don't work too well on the track when you're trying to brake, because what happens is you go into the braking zone or try to take a high G turn, and those marbles come off. Unfortunately, when the marbles come off, that means you don't have any traction, and then obviously you're sliding across the track. So it's very important to stay on the line. Don't get off into those marbles, if you do, you're going to pay the penalty, and you're going to have to basically scrub your tires off before you can actually dive into those turns, and without a doubt you're going to lose time. So you have to pay attention to that, and with the tire degradation that you're going to have in general, that's why you have to back up your braking zones. You have to be mindful of your turn in, because it'll be very easy as the tires degrade for you to end up off of the line. So it's one of those things that the degradation is actually a big part of, especially racing here at Sonoma, given the the surface itself, as well as how twisty, curvy of a track it is with the elevation change as well.
And Shelby Blackstock continues to lead, the overall leader here as he heads up through turn number 2. And we talked a little bit about the differences between some of the layouts, some of the cars here, Kevin. But obviously, your experiences right now in TCA, you're in a front-wheel drive car. Let's explain differences between front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive, because it seems like for some it's a pretty big adjustment to make. How do you drive that car differently than a rear-wheel drive car, or is it more similar than people would think?
It's actually a lot more similar than you think. The front-wheel drive makes it a little bit harder to kind of go to throttle when you're in the middle of a turn, but I do a lot of tricks to the car to make it handle better to where I can still get to the throttle early anyway. So in the end, once you have the car working the way you want it to on track, you drive it very similar, no matter whether it's front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive.
There's the number 14. That's James Safronis in the GMG Racing car right now, and a second overall as it stands, working the way through turn 7. We're using the wider hairpin out there, which there's that big berm on the apex, and we already talked about how to attack some of those earlier. Then we head through the S's, and this is a really interesting part of this racetrack because of how fast it is. Kevin, tell me a little bit about transient maneuvers in these cars and how you're going to operate the car at a high speed here once the downforce starts to pile on the car.
Right, the thing that's hard to get used to with the Aero is that the faster you go, the better it works. So these S's are really interesting at Sonoma because you're basically accelerating the whole way through them. So you basically have to really trust that the Aero is gonna help, especially once you get to the end of the S's, and that definitely takes a little bit of practice.
And CJ, your experience in the TCR car, obviously compared to the GT4 cars, which not in this series, but in IMSA they run in the same race at the same time. The TCR cars have a lot of downforce relative to their weight and how fast they are, though. So you're leaning on the Aero a lot in that car.
Yeah, you have to lean on the Aero a lot in the car because the TCR cars roughly have about 350 horsepower, where a GT4 car is about 450. And in a TCR car, you can run at tracks like this, given they're so twisty and stuff like that, pretty close to a GT4 lap time. And in order to do so, you have to hustle the car, and as Kevin was saying, use the Aero advantage. The fact that you have all the big wing and the splitter that's actually holding the car down to the ground, in order to be able to accelerate. And if you use that Aero effectively, it also helps to keep the tires under the car, because you're using the Aero in order to push down on the car and to be able to keep smooth lines with the tires. If you don't use the Aero, by going fast where you need to, you'll actually buzz the tires. What I mean by that, overheat them, because they're not getting the downforce, therefore the grip that they need.
Well, George Kurtz continues to run podium in his class GT3 Pro-Am, but I want to go back to P1TS for a moment just to show you an interesting tidbit that Ken Lynn brought up. As you see these lines here on the bottom of the screen, the red one is the 24 car, and the white one is the 63. The 63 is the sister car, the DXTT Racing Mercedes. You can see how both those lines have fallen down, and Kevin, it looks like the 24 is holding up the 63 just a little bit.
That's right, especially in the middle of the screen there, the red and the white line were matching each other very, very closely. So it's pretty obvious that the kind of Ferrari was holding up the other Mercedes.
Yeah, and obviously, CJ, I'm sure you can speak. We talked about traffic, and multi-class traffic is one thing. However, when you're sort of in the same category, the same style of car, it becomes a lot more difficult to make passes because they're not going to move over for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's these cars are competing, in the same class. So definitely the Ferrari's not going to get out of David's way in order to let him through, and it is very difficult to pass here, especially when cars are so equally matched to begin with. So, but for the looseness that we saw in the Ferrari earlier, I think, and that's probably what is holding David up a bit to be able to get by. It's one of those things that looks like David has his hands full a little bit, even with his own car. I know that earlier in the day they were having a little bit of a setup problem in getting drive off the corners as well. So I think the Ferrari, as well as David's Mercedes, are having a little bit of trouble, getting the power down, like we were talking about.
Well, and we also saw George Kurtz get by that Ferrari a little bit earlier in the race, Kevin. And So that obviously, when you're in a field like this where the racing is so close, that brings up the aggression level right out of the gate, because if you're going to get stuck behind him, you're going to lose a lot of time. So on lap 1, how aggressive are you willing to be to get by cars that you know might be holding you up later in the race?
Well, you really have to be very aggressive, but at the same time, especially with this race being so long, there's
Well, I
still
think
an
they,
hour
like
left,
everyone else,
just over an hour left at this point. You have to be aggressive, but at the same time, you can't ruin your race too early. You don't want to kind of make contact with another car or go off track. So it's really a fine balance. You need to try to take advantage of any speed difference between the cars, but then kind of protect your car at the same time.
So we see Shelby Blackstock has extended that lead out to 12.5 seconds now, so pretty safe as it stands. Also got the hazards on that car right now, so I guess when you're out there racing, I'm sure there's a distraction keeping them from seeing that. But CJ, that just goes to show you. I mean, it's not necessarily using them like you would on the highway, but they still retain a lot of their factory electronics harnesses as well.
Still have a lot of the factory stuff, and I was looking at it, wondering what was going on there. Was he touching the brakes in all the wrong places? Because it looked like he did have the hazard lights on. So I wonder if the hazard lights are somehow connected to the flash to pass. So in the cars, you actually have a button where you can actually flash the headlights in order to let cars know that you're coming up on, that you're coming, so you catch it in the mirror so that you can let the car by. In this case, he was just passing Jason Bell, who's running in the GT Sports Club in a GT2 car, like I talked about earlier, very fast in the straightaways, doesn't have the arrow, so when you get down into the twisty stuff, it's a little bit more difficult. And I think that might have been what we were saying is flash to pass also activating the hazard light function, if you will, from the rear.
Taking back a look at P1TS here, you can see the red line encroaching on the blue one, and that tells me that Ferrari is closing in just a little bit, Kevin.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the lap times a little bit earlier, and it looks like George might be struggling with his tires a little bit. His lap times have started to slow down just a little bit, so maybe at this point the Ferrari has done a little bit better job managing the tires, but it's really all a guess at this point until we get a little bit more.
Right, and looking at the sector times, it's hard to tell which sectors are the ones that he's losing ground, but it's just a little bit here and a little bit there. You can see in Sector 3, though, as we got throughout the race, going upward here from lap 1 all the way up to lap 15 where we are now. We were in the mid-33s earlier, and now we're kind of in the low 34s. That tells me that Sector 3 in particular seems to be one of those spots where he's getting stuck.
Right, and Sector 3 is two of the sharpest turns on the track. So that's got the turn 9, the chicane there, and then turn 11 where you have to turn all the way back around. So it's possible that the turns without the arrow are maybe the hardest ones for the Mercedes right now.
Right, you're leaning all on mechanical grip and not so much that aerodynamic stuff there as well. So as that continues, we've got, we've got 28 minutes into the race, about an hour left, and looking at the laps completed, we've done 16, about 37 and a half left to go. CJ, big racetracks versus small ones in terms of the lap time. Do you prefer having a shorter distance track where you do more reps, or do you like having a longer track with a lot more straight?
Yeah, I've always liked to have the longer tracks like the Road Americas that are, right around 4 miles, where you have big, long straightaways. And then you still have highly technical sections. Part of that is that it actually gives you a little bit of a breather on the lap, because as you're going straight, you can actually take a look at some of the gauges and things like that and get a little bit of a breather. Where here at this course, I can't remember actually looking down and paying attention to any of those things. If it didn't give me a big red screen, I was just going to keep on moving. Yeah, if I'm to say my favorite or my types of tracks, I like something that has a little bit more VIR or Road America, that has good straightaways where you can actually air the car out a bit. Different cars have different preferences as well, though. Some cars are better on the straightaways. This should be a pretty good track for the Mercedes because it doesn't have the legs. Like you said earlier, or Kevin said earlier, not all the cars. The Mercedes is actually down on horsepower from what you actually have from the street car version, because they have restrictors in them to slow them down. So on the straightaway, they're not as good, but they use that arrow in a lot of tire to their advantage in the twisty sections.
And looking back at P1TS here, we can see just the lap times. The number 24 Ferrari in the mid 143s, which last time out was quicker than the race, or at least the class leader, Safronis out front, race run a 143.660. Gandor ran a 143.604, so fourth in class right now. It's quicker than the race leader, Kevin.
Right, and like we've said a few times now, I think that really comes down to
how you manage the tires from the beginning of the race. If you go out and push too hard too soon, then the car can really slow down at the end of the tire's life. So we may be seeing that right now, and it's also based on how they balance the cars. I mean, there's a lot of manufacturers out there, but they try to make the cars all do the same lap time, but they do it in different ways. Some cars have more power and are heavier, and other cars have less power and are lighter, and that really affects your tire life as well.
We can see that Ferrari closing in. Gandor chasing down Kurtz here, and all this live data is possible due to AWS and CrowdStrike working together. This P1TS tool is really neat, CJ, but tell me a little bit about, while we watch this battle, a little bit about how AWS and CrowdStrike work together in the motorsport space.
So yeah, absolutely. CrowdStrike and AWS work together in a lot of areas. We're a 360 partner, if you will, in that CrowdStrike uses AWS in order to run their security products. At the same time, AWS uses those products. In the case of P1TS, the great thing is that actually it's running in the AWS cloud. So Ken Lin and the team at there actually go ahead and use the AWS cloud in order to run this software in the cloud, and it's secured because AWS uses CrowdStrike's products to secure it. We're actually securing the data in the stream using CrowdStrike's capabilities. So a little bit beyond that, we actually have, as we see the Ferrari closing in on George, I think maybe the loose setup that we saw the Ferrari having earlier may actually come to an advantage, where the balance of the car, he's actually keeping the tires under it, which normally wouldn't be the case, but it seems to be working out for the Ferrari. But quickly back to our partnership with our relationship and partnership with CrowdStrike. In motorsports, we actually work together in order to bring the message of both of our companies to the executives that lead our customer companies, and to traditionally in the CXO events we normally build relationships, and that's the idea. Is we'd like to bring people out to the track so that we wouldn't necessarily be doing it here, via virtual means. We'd actually have them here and be able to talk to them face to face and explain all this, and build relationships such that we all know that it's a lot easier to do business when you can trust people. And once you get to know people, you have that. Here on screen, you can actually see some of that GT2 traffic that I talked about earlier. You got one of the cars, they're going through the traffic, and the white car to the driver's left there, to George's left, is actually a GT2 car that's getting past, and it's making it pretty difficult here. He's taking the wide route around, so that gives everybody a little bit of room, but that Ferrari is sniffing right at George's tailpipe, so Mercedes pretty wide, so we'll see if George is able to keep Ferrari behind him as we start to approach here in a little while. Pit stops to change drivers and get a little bit of fuel and throw some tires on it.
I was going to say, in the braking zone there, chasing down Gandor closing in on Kurtz down there in the braking zone. And it's the cat and mouse game that you're playing. You see that traffic, and it's like smelling blood in the water there, Kevin, as you see the Ferrari close back in. But now you get to really see the differences between the cars. Again, all FIA homologated cars, so they're all pretty similar in performance. But when they're this close together, you can really see where one car gains on the other here down into turn 5 especially.
Right. I mean, it looks like the Mercedes has a lot more grip right now. So when we get in the kind of really tight and twisty first sector, the Mercedes pulls a little bit of a gap, and then as we get to a couple of the straightaways here, the Ferrari closes that back in. So really, when you're in this situation, you try to maximize your car's advantages and minimize the disadvantages, and that's how you can maintain your position.
So following a GT2 car through the S's here, Kurtz under attack from Gandor in the number 24 Ferrari as they head down the hill into turn number 9. And this is where I saw the Ferrari seemed like it was closing a lot, was on the brakes. But without knowing where those GT2 cars are going to start jumping on the binders, you're not really sure how deep you want to go, because the last thing you want to do is run into somebody. That'll end your day. So I think Gandor is reading this very well. I think he had an opportunity but chose to back out. He was being very patient. We still had a driver swap to do, CJ. So I like the patience that we're seeing out of the 24 right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also, once again, we're running into GT2 traffic where the GT3 cars are making it through, and you can see actually that George is actually closing in on Fordhead in front of them. Although Fordhead's actually in an AM class, so they're not racing within class, it's still, he closes in on them. The nice thing is if George is able to make his way around this, around the GT2 car of Frederick, this is actually, this is exactly what we worry about, is when you get stuck behind traffic and aren't able to make it around, and now you have this little short shoot. Stu Frederick, being a seasoned racer, is nice enough he actually got out of the throttle, let the two cars around, and so that they could go ahead and race. But now George has the Ferrari very close to his bumper.
And are putting the pressure on as they come down into turn 4. And now into 5, this long sweeping corner, but this is where the Mercedes has been pulling away. And Kevin, you mentioned this. It just seems like the higher speed corners is where the Mercedes really is gripping up and going. And it's the tight and twisty stuff where the Ferrari has been closing in, but the traffic has also helped quite a bit. So how natural is this closure that we're seeing from the Ferrari to the AMG?
Well, I mean, it's sort of hard to tell at this point because traffic's playing such a big role in it. It really, where you catch a lapped car can really either help or hurt a battle with another car. If you can get by a lapped car easily on the straightaway, and then the car that you're fighting with can't, then you can build a gap. But then that also works in the exact opposite. If you can't get by and you have to slow down because of the car in front of you, then that ends up closing that gap really close.
Here's a replay of some action on the racetrack. It just happened. A big moment for, I believe that's the number 14 car, which is Safronis, and just got in a little bit too hot there, CJ, and ABS, but you can't make the corner for going too fast.
Yeah, absolutely. James has thousands of laps at this track. He's a previous professional himself. But as we get closer to pit stop time, these tires are pretty ragged by now, and it was clear that he was under pressure from behind and just got in a little too hot, and it happens, especially towards the end. That was what I was talking about, is managing the tires, and the further the later in the session that you go, the more you have to back up your brake zones. In that case, he didn't back it up far enough, but it happens, and you're gonna see others doing similar as the tires start to go off here.
Well, we can eliminate some classes on the P1TS software here and go back and show you how close that gap is between George Kurtz and Hornad, which it was about a couple tenths of a second at the start-finish line last time through, but I think we're watching this battle now, and there is Gandor right back on the tailpipes of the CrowdStrike Mercedes into the braking zone for turn number 6, and a big lunge on the outside, trying to maybe arc over and come out late apex here in turn 7.
Yeah, to me, that looked like the Ferrari maybe broke a little bit later than he wanted to. I don't think he was actually trying to make a move there. So that's one thing you have to, especially when you're the lead car, like George is in this case, you kind of have to watch your mirrors and make sure that the car behind you isn't making any mistakes like that, but you have to keep it from distracting you at the same time. So I think George is doing a great job right now, just kind of maintaining the pace. He's in control right now, and I think it doesn't look like he's defending the Ferrari. He's just basically making his speed is making it really hard for the Ferrari to get by.
Well, you could mirror drive it and maybe make mistakes yourself, but I think Kurtz is focused out the windshield. And with that on P1TS, we can actually see that red and blue line. They've converged, but the red line has not overtaken the blue yet on the y=0 axis. That just tells me that Kurtz hasn't really deviated his strategy. He just continues to run his line, but that 24 Ferrari is stuck back there and is going to have to get very creative or very aggressive to make that move happen. How much of a push is there to do this before the pit stop, or would you rather try to jump the spot on pit lane?
Well, you'd want to get it done ahead of time. That way you're clear to be able to make your pit stop, and if you're going to be able to gain any time on pit lane, you want it to create a gap such that when you come back out, that the pro drivers, when they get in the car, aren't on top of each other. So George wants to be able to give Colin Brown as much of a gap as he can away from that Ferrari, such that he can go ahead and pull away. You can kind of see, like we were talking about earlier, that as they're going through the twisty section, the Mercedes pulls away, and we'll get down here into a little bit of the straightaway area, and the Ferrari will close back up. But looking forward to the pit stops. The DXDT team at VIR pulled off one of the fastest pit stops that there's a minimum amount of time you have to be on pit lane, and they pulled it off and were able to come off of pit lane. I think it was 0.02 of a second to the good, meaning that it was so close to the minimum time, and that helped to make sure that George stayed out front and resulted in a win. So I'm looking forward to the pit stops as they get closer here. Get George out of the car, get Colin Brown in, and Colin Brown is a seasoned professional. Second at Le Mans, has won the Daytona 24 hours and things like that. Once Colin gets in the car, he'll have new tires, thank God. and he'll go out there and continue the good work that George has had. And here we actually see, this is a GT Sports Club race right here, coming down to the end, I believe, for their portion of the race. Looks like the Audi is pushing forward past past the GT2 RS portion.
So a couple minutes left here before the halfway point, and Kevin, could you explain maybe the minimum time that CJ's talking about for those that aren't aware of how sports car racing works with the driver swaps?
Yeah, SRO does a really good job of trying to equalize all the kind of activities on track. So for the pit stop, to try to make one team not have an advantage by having a lot of people on their team, is they kind of specify a minimum time that you have to spend on pit lane. And if you spend any less than that, then you can be disqualified. So the kind of what every team does is they try to get as close to that minimum time as you possibly can. And it's not just the time that you're stopped in your pit stall. It also includes the time that you're driving through pit lane. So it's actually a pretty complex thing to get right.
So we got to see the Racer's Edge car, the number 93, Shelby Blackstock, coming into the pit lane. He's going to jump out. And I bet you Ryan Marine's going to pipe up here in just a second and tell us what's going on. But Ryan's been down there in pit lane. I met him the other day. He's a great guy, hard worker. But as you see Blackstock getting out, Trent Hinman getting in that car. And Trent has got all sorts of experience with all sorts of different cars and teams the last couple of years, CJ.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you'll see here is because you had the AMs in the Pro-Am series that were in the car, the teams will likely try to get the AMs out of the car as quickly as they can, such that the Pro is in the car for the longer period of time, meaning that they're able to potentially make faster lap time in the longer that's in the car, better chances of the win. So I think the Acura team did a great job to get him in right at once the window opened up.
You can see on the bottom left of the screen there the pit in and out stints. Shelby Blackstock jumping in and getting out of the pit lane, and we'll see what that time is as they come out. And this is a crucial time that all the teams are calculating. How long can we spend on pit lane? Obviously, you're shooting for that minimum time, but you're looking at the driver behind you and where you got to pop out to stay in front. So Trent Hinman going to come out of the lane now and get those tires warmed up, because cold race tires, Kevin, not always super fun, but they're not going to be cold for very long.
Right. Fortunately, these GT3 cars get their tires are pre-warmed with some warmers, so they don't take very long to get up to temperature. But you definitely have to be careful coming out of pit lane and not overdrive the car until they reach their fully optimum point.
And we can see on the PM1TS software the white dot at the bottom right of the graph here. That marks a pit stop, and you can see the drop-down positions for the number 93 Racer's Edge car as Hinman got back in. The first of the drivers to come to pit lane. CJ, there's a lot of strategy involved in when you want to come to pit lane. Windows update. Let's not do that now. But when you're planning for a pit stop, why would you want to stay out longer versus come in sooner? What's the strategies going on there?
So there's different types of strategies. You can try to overcut or undercut, meaning that if your driver that's out there on the track is able to go ahead and run faster lap times than the other car that has come into the pits, you actually will gain that time on track, and subsequently when you pit, the next driver will actually come out in front of the other car. So you can actually do it that way, or you can try the other part, is to pit as soon as you can, which is exactly what the Acura has done, to be able to come in. They were in the lead already, come in, get what they believe to be their faster driver, the pro driver in the car, and get him back out there. And now when everybody else pits, the idea is, or their plan is, at least in that case, is for them to cycle out to be actually in the lead. So there are different strategies along those lines. The P1TS
I checked with the series official, and our information is correct.
Indication
so
of that
the memo must have been
grayed
missed
out
somehow. The
boxes that
window was indeed moved.
Be able to see where people should
yeah, they're
going to
have to serve a penalty or something,
time.
because they clearly didn't get the memo that something had changed as far as the regulations are concerned, and that's a big hit.
So Hinman heading down through turn 5 here, and Fuentes, the current race leader. We go back to P1TS and have a look at the 04. Look where that tail is, guys, right, that tail that's chasing the number 1 car. So that would just keep him on the lead lap, or actually would just put him a lap down behind the overall leader once he hits pit lane. So that's something that you're considering as well. What if we got a full course yellow? You have to keep yourself kind of aware of where you're going to pop out just in case those things happen.
Yeah, last thing you want to do is get trapped a lap down. Based upon when you're pitting. The other thing is that if the full course yellow were to come out and Traditionally in SRO racing, full course caution, a lot of times they'll actually close the pits so that you can't come in and then wait for the track to go green again. You have to take the green flag before then they'll reopen the pit lane. So there's a little bit of a buffer there, a little bit of an insurance plan there. But at the same time, if you come in, just before the double yellow, it would actually work out to your advantage because you'd be able to cycle around and be out at the front or near the front, if not.
So once our drivers come to pit lane and they're going to switch into the car, you get kind of a fresh face in there. And obviously, Kevin, when you jump in a car that's been driven by another competitor and a teammate for a little while, you jump right in and all of a sudden you're in a completely different race. At the start, it's easy to know who you're racing, but how close are you paying attention to what you need to do before you jump in the car?
Well, I think the main thing that you're paying attention to is the first couple of laps. You're trying to see what the car really feels like, because the last time that Colin, for example, drove the car was yesterday. So he's going to get in the car and he's going to see if it feels like what he expects and see what kind of car it is. Does it handle the way he wants, and little things like that? Because we kind of in one of these races, you have to sort of guess what the car needs to handle perfectly because the weather conditions are all going to change. Especially here in Sonoma, because of the sun, the temperature of the track is going to change quite a bit from when this race started all the way to the end. So I think that's the first part, and then especially once the race has already started and the cars have spread out just a little bit, it sort of makes it easier because you're not thrown in with a bunch of cars all grouped together. So you can sort of start dealing with cars one at a time. That's a little bit easier to overcome.
And so you see some more pit stops happening. And you see also the GT2 cars have pulled off. That's why they got the checkered flag next to their number and name. That's because they raced for 40 minutes. They're a different category, so they're done. So now we're down to the last 7 drivers that are in the GT3 spec cars. As Trent Hinman comes back around, should cycle back out to lead Fuentes. We just saw hit pit lane in the Ferrari, the number 1. I think Sofronis also has to come on down, but Hinman goes back to the top board and runs the purple lap for the day so far, a 1:39.158 for the number 93. That's a pretty solid time around here, CJ.
Yeah, absolutely, and that shows you the difference between really, really good amateurs and a true pro. He went out there and set essentially a qualifying lap for pretty close to it, a qualifying lap on his first lap out there on the track. He was on new tires, fully fueled up, so actually pretty good lap there. Whoa, that was close there on pit lane.
That was a little close.
Too close for my comfort, but you can see that James Sofronis was in there getting his pit change done as well. So I think we'll cycle out here in a little while and see how everybody lines up.
Yeah, we also saw George Kurtz on pit lane as well, getting service and switching over for Colin Brown to take over that DXCT Racing Mercedes AMG, Kevin. So now we got the pro drivers jumping in the car, and now the race is going to get a little more serious.
That's right. I mean, these guys are some of the best out there. So depending on where they come out on track and how close they are to the other cars, you may see them start battling right out of pit lane. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everybody cycle back out on track.
Well, big news here. The Acura of Trent Hinman with Racers Edge Motorsports, they might get a penalty for pitting before the pit window. We did see them come to pit lane. It was a lot before everybody else, or I should say a little bit before everybody else. We didn't see that pit window open graphic on the screen. They hit pit lane, so that would be a penalty. CJ, do we know what penalty that would be?
Traditionally, that'll be a drive-through penalty, if I'm not mistaken, which means they would actually have to come down pit lane at pit lane speed and drive through, which is likely, 20 to 30 seconds, depending on, I don't know exactly what it is here, but that's huge when you start to look at the deltas between the cars right now. That would take them from being in the lead to mid to towards the back of the pack. That's huge, and that's interesting because we did see that they got in there so much earlier than everybody else, and I thought that they'd called it perfectly, and apparently maybe they didn't. Maybe they got in there just a little bit too soon. I'm sure the SRO race control will actually clear that up and see what the penalty will be. Normally you have a couple laps to serve that penalty, so we should see him coming down pit lane here in a lap or two.
Right, so you can see on the screen on the P1TS software, again, the ghosting line around the green track map edge, that is the theoretical pit stop time for the 04 car. But that's for a full pit stop. But you can see the 93, that's the gold box heading through turn 8 right now, and the gap he's got back to the number 1, that second place Fuentes. Kevin, I mean, again, 30 seconds on pit lane, pit road speed here, 35, 40 miles an hour? It's probably kilometers.
50.
50 kilometers. So that's not very fast. So that's going to feel like an eternity for the 93. But when he comes back out, he might be right on top of that number 1, who I think is now going to be Rodrigo Baptista in the Squadra Corsa car.
Right. I mean, anytime you have to drive down pit lane unexpectedly, it feels like you've completely stopped. So that'll definitely be pretty devastating for them.
You can see there is Colin Brown right behind the number 24 that was following them into the pit. So a leapfrog for the Ferrari in the pit lane, but now Brown's going to go to work and try to get back by him as they head up the hill into turn number 5. Ferrari was fighting loose conditions earlier, had the back end kind of stepping out. Mercedes was planted. You can see that right through the center of the corner, tucked up very nicely to the inside. Now they're going to stretch their legs onto the straightaways a little bit, and we'll see if Brown can reel the Ferrari back in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, essentially what you're going to see here, since these guys are just starting to battle for their portion of the race, is you're going to see kind of Colin sizing up the Ferrari and trying to figure out where he has an advantage, and then kind of making a little bit of a strategy for how to get by.
So with 39 minutes to go, we're past the halfway point, and look at Colin Brown stepping out of line just to step out of the mirror, big dive on the brakes, and that's more of a distraction technique than anything. He wasn't looking for a pass or CJ, that's just to get out of the mirror of the driver behind you and make him look up and maybe make a mistake.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about the Mercedes, and especially having that big red front end. You can just move yourself to the side, get in the mirror, and all it takes is one little glance by that driver in front to look back, and they may miss their braking point or just be a little bit off. And once they do that, you dive inside and take off. Colin's one of the best, and he's definitely got a whole bag of tricks, and man, they fly through there with crazy speed.
Yeah, that's turn 1 that they just went through, and there's not a lot to catch you if you dip a right rear tire off in the grass out there, Kevin. Pushing it to the limits, and that's what Colin Brown's so good at. He's got experience in pretty much everything. He's run prototypes before. He's run basically everything that you could run under the sun in a race car. And then stepping right into the heat of a battle. This is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
That's right. He's using the arrow on that Mercedes to his full advantage right now. So and you'll see him kind of getting really close to the Ferrari as well, trying to kind of get into a little bit of a draft, and that'll help his straight line speed just a little bit, and then he can use kind of his cornering speed advantage to maybe get by.
And looking back at P1TS, we've got an amazing look at the pit stop delta, which put Kurtz and Brown behind that Ferrari. We can see that their time was a 1:29.131 on pit lane. It was a 1:26 for the Ferrari. So that 3 seconds in pit lane didn't quite transfer to 3 seconds on the racetrack, but Brown was able to eat that gap up pretty quickly. Now he's right back on the tailpipes of that 488
It is
Ferrari.
indeed. We already have a winner to congratulate here as race cars continue to circulate. Jason, welcome back to the series. Welcome back to Victory Lane as well. How was the return to racing at this level? Did it go as you anticipated?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the last race I did in World Challenge was 2013, and in the Viper with Dodge, and it's great to be back. And obviously, being off for that long, it's hard to get back in the car, but we had a good result and great finish, and it was fun to run with some of the the newer GT3 cars. So it was a great race.
Awesome. Congratulations. Well done, and best of luck tomorrow.
Hey, thank you.
And we're watching this amazing battle right now with Brown all over the back of, I think that's Batista in that, or no, that's not the right, that's the wrong car. We're looking at the 24, Siegel, thank you, in that 24 car for TR3 Racing in that Ferrari GT3. Taking a look at P1TS, we can look at the change was actually done on the pit lane. You can see where the dot is. That stands for the pit stop, guys. That's where it swapped, but now those lines basically right on top of each other as the Mercedes chases him down into turn 5. And this is where the 04 was a little quicker earlier, but I guess for CJ, in these higher downforce cars, they also produce a lot of wake. Is that a consideration at all here? Turn 5 is a fairly fast corner.
A fairly fast corner, and yeah, there's definitely some wake there. But I think in turn 5, or turn 6 actually, where they were going down through there, I think Colin was actually in under his wing, and still getting enough air onto his rear wing. If anything, you'd be looking for his front end to wash out because he wouldn't have any air on his splitter, but it seemed like he was able to tuck right in, and I think he did exactly what Kevin said, is trying to stay right on his bumper for 2 reasons. You can see him right now, he's tucked in trying to get through this twisty section, and with that draft, such that he could probably try to outbrake him here into turn 11. Yeah, he's trying to get a better drive off of this turn, and try to get up inside of him. which you probably won't give him the room to do so. But anyways, he's trying to stay right on him so that he'll also get in his mirrors and wait for a mistake to happen.
And what do we mean by wake? We mean wake as in the literal sense. Air is a fluid just like water is, so if you've ever taken your boat out on the bay and you can see that wake that the boat produces, it's the same thing with air. So there's a certain extent right in behind the lead car that's actually a good thing because it reduces the drag on the car. You can close in and you're pushing through less air. However, once you get back behind it a little bit, there's more turbulence involved, and all these fancy aerodynamic pieces on these cars can't work quite as efficiently with all that turbulence going on. But again, I do think this Ferrari is definitely holding up Colin Brown in that number 04 DXTT Racing Mercedes AMG GT3 right now. As Hinman, I think they're fighting the penalty right now the best that they can. That's what you got to do there, CJ. You got to fight your side even if you're wrong. You just got to do it just in case.
Absolutely, and I'm sure they're right now they're pleading their case, and they don't want to get. Normally, if you get a penalty and you're told that you have to do drive through, and you don't do it within a few laps, they'll actually stop counting your time, and then you're essentially not out there. They'll black flag you and say you need to return to pit lane, and your race is over. Right now, I'm sure that's on a hold while they're actually pleading their case and say, no, that's not the case. We should be, our driver's telling us it was clear, and we'll see that here shortly.
Going back to P1TS, this battle continues right now between Siegel in the number 24 and Colin Brown in the 04. Note the sister car, though, that's the white line after the pit stop. That is now Ryan Dial in that car, and with those two fighting in front of him, he's been able to reel them in just a little bit, and the closer those lines get, the closer they are on track, Kevin.
Right, I think that indicates potentially how much Colin's being held up right now, because the two Mercedes should be capable of very, very similar lap times. So if Ryan's able to close that fast, then Colin is being held up quite a bit.
And if we can go back to the lap times here as well, we might be able to get a good idea of what we're seeing. So the lap for Colin Brown last time by was a 140.722. For Dial, a 139.591. That's pretty solid. It's not the best lap that we've seen today, but it's definitely quicker than Brown right now, who's stuck in behind Siegel, who just ran a 140.567. So those cars all converging together for fifth overall, and that would be third in the GT3 Pro-Am category.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at Ryan Dial's time on that last lap, it's actually the fastest dirt of that lap.
We got pit stop infraction for the Gandor Siegel number 24 car. I'm not sure what that's for, but that's going to put them right out of this fight, and I think Colin Brown doesn't know this yet, but as soon as he sees that car hit pit lane, he's going to cheer a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different infractions you can have. One of them would be to actually have a pit stop that is actually too short. If he comes back onto the track before he's hit the minimum pit time, once again, that'll result in a stop or a drive-through penalty. You can also have too many people over the wall. There's a lot of different things can happen on pit lane in order to cause that. Well, this actually, he hasn't dove in yet. I think they'll probably plead their case for a couple laps as well. But once he does, that'll free Colin up to be able to run qualifying laps for a while, as Ryan Dial is actually still closing in on him.
What's the success rate of those protests on pit lane? When you get a penalty, how often are you successful in protests?
Very rare. Very rare. Normally what it comes down to is, they have cameras and timing and things like that are pretty definitive. And unless you can very quickly provide evidence that something was wrong, video evidence or otherwise, that you entered pit lane and it said it was still okay, even though it was by a quarter of a second or something of that nature. But very rarely. Especially when it comes to pit, entering or exiting either too soon or leaving too soon. It's pretty much a done deal.
So there is the Baptista. That is the second place car right now, the number 1 Ferrari 488, and that car should, in theory, take over the race lead. But we have not seen the Racer's Edge car hit pit lane yet, which is surprising because you usually get a little while to serve that penalty. I'm wondering if they either won that or they're not, I don't know. What's going on?
So yeah, there is a possibility. One of the things is that race control, the SRO, doesn't want to ruin a race for a driver or a team if there is anything going on, or there's any possibility that they are correct. So they may actually delay the decision on that and review and have a discussion after the race, and subsequently, if it's found to be held up that the SRO was correct, that driver would end up with a time penalty that's equivalent to a drive-through penalty, and they'll move down the lane. But as you can see here, it looks like they lost as we expected, and they're serving their punishment.
So this will move Colin Brown up a spot in class and move them past the 24 car, which was holding him up for a little while. And now I'm curious to see between the two DXDT racing cars, Kevin, how their pace will compare, because it seemed fairly equal before. And now with that Ferrari out of the way, we should see them equalize back out in theory on our P1TS graph.
Right, I think Colin was being held up quite a bit, so I expect he'll be into the 139 lap times here very, very shortly.
And you can see the drop on the graph there for the number 24, the red line coming off the charts now because of the pit stop for the penalty. So 93 Racers Edge car continues to lead this race, and we're getting down to the last little bit, down to the last third, the last 30 minutes, and this is where your mindset might change here, CJ. You've done, now you've got your first driver out of the car, you've got your second driver in, and now the car, are you starting to lose any performance in this car tire-wise, or does it run? I mean, these are endurance cars, so they would last a while on the brakes and that sort of thing, but do they get tired towards the end of the race?
Not necessarily. The nice thing is when you change drivers, you also change tires. So you roughly have the same car at the end as you did at the midway point before the drivers changed. And the thought here, at least for this race with the pros in the car, is that they'll be able to keep their tires under them further into the race. I do think that all that battling that Colin had to do with the Ferrari may have taken a good bit out of his tires, and that's where we'll see, the DXDT cars actually very close together here for a while, because I think that battling definitely will take it out of the car a bit.
Well, you can see on the graph how close the blue and white lines are together. Those are the DXTT Racing sister cars. There is the pit stop, or at least the drive-through for the 93 Racers Edge car, serving that penalty for pitting before the pit window. Again, there is a certain window in the middle of the race where drivers can come and switch out to their co-driver, change the tires, add fuel to the car if needed. They pit outside that box. You got to come hit pit lane, and that's a strategy thing, right? You're trying to get as close as possible. And they just stepped over that line a little bit too much.
I got confirmation that there is a penalty, and it is a stop, and you have to stop for as long as you would stay stopped for a normal pit stop. So it's 87 seconds that they have to be stationary in response to the penalty that they were given. So definitely a crippling penalty here.
So we just heard Ryan Marine explain it. Not only do you have to come down pit lane, you actually have to stop and wait for the entirety of a minimum pit stop time. CJ, that's a pretty severe penalty.
That's I mean, because you've already done in their case, because they entered early, they did a full length one already. Now this is a second one with no advantage to it, because you're not getting new tires or fuel. You're just sitting there waiting and blowing the time. That's huge. That's taking them out of this race. But there's a reason why they have those, have the pit lane set up so that it opens at a certain point in time. Essentially what this is doing is making them feel the pain for having come too early, now making sure that they're able to do a clean stop.
Now we're going to watch this gold line drop basically down to the bottom of the graph as he had to wait a little while. So we'll see once they come back across the line how that graph will sort itself out. But back on the racetrack is the 93 Racers Edge car. That's going to turn the lead over to Rodrigo Baptista in the Squadra Corsa car. Originally had Martin Fuentes in earlier, the number 1 Ferrari. And then behind him is Jerome Bleekemolen, who is Bleekemolen's with James Safronis in the GMG Racing Porsche 911 GT3R. That is a rear-engine car, Kevin. That's a totally different way to go fast. And you're an engineer. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to put the engine back there dynamically, but they made it work somehow, and it's one of the most successful race cars of all time.
Right. One of the interesting things about GT3 is all the cars are rear-wheel drive, but the engine can be kind of in the front, the middle, or the rear of the car. So you see a lot of different configurations from that viewpoint. So it's definitely a challenge to make all those cars perform similarly, but fortunately SRO has done a great job of doing that.
And heading back to our P1TS, you can see how the gaps between the blue and white lines have stabilized, and that tells me that the Ferrari was the reason that DL was able to catch up to Colin Brown, and now they've pretty much stayed like that for a full lap or two. So I'd expect that pace to be pretty much where it is for the rest of the race as we jump back live to 25 minutes left in this race, and it's a 14-second gap from first to second in class. And taking a look at our live timing here, it looks like Brown and Dial separated by about 8 seconds, or as it stands. Is that right? Looks like that's right. I'm trying to understand. There's a lot of numbers here. It can be fairly
on track it looks to be a little bit closer than that because.
Yes. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's about 1 second, 1.5 seconds back.
Yeah.
So you can see the gaps there in the middle of your screen. There's a whole lot of columns here, and there's also theoretical time, Kevin, which is the time everybody's chasing all the time. That's basically if you stick together your best sectors, that's what you would end up with.
Right. It's pretty rare to actually achieve your theoretical best time, especially over a really long race like this. But essentially, if you break the track down into different sections and you kind of combine all the best section that you put together over the course of the whole race, then that's what defines that theoretical lap time. And it's always, as a driver, it's a challenge to see how close you can get to it.
Well, and you can see where those sections are broken up. On the bottom left side, there's the line across the racetrack with the white outline. That's the start-finish line. And usually tracks are broken up into 3 sectors, and Sonoma is the same way. You can see the first sector end between turns 5 and 6 in the middle of your screen. Then sector 2 turns into sector 3 right at the bottom where the 93 is traveling right now between turns 8A and 9A. And the third sector, it's got that twisty tight chicane. So there's a lot of corners here to gain time, a lot of corners here to lose time, and it's about how you manage that and you can get closer in your theoretical best lap time. As we've got Baptista continuing to drive away from Bleak and Mullet. And there is the number 14. James Safronis was in that car earlier, the GMG Racing car. Nice livery on that car, too. Not as good as the CrowdStrike one, but still very sharp looking.
James is a master with the liveries on the cars, and a lot of the GMG cars will carry the GMG blue that James has actually made the standard. You see their big blue haulers and everything like that, and the cars with the blue, white, and orange really do stand out. It's a beautiful car, and they're both wheeling it quite well. One of the things to bring up is that you had Trent Hinman that had to serve the penalty, went in and subsequently came out right behind Ryan Dial and George here. So Hinman, who was running very fast lap times, I'm sure is working. It looks like by lap time he's actually closing in on Ryan and George a little bit, so that'll be interesting. The other thing is that Hinman is actually in a different class. Looks to be in the silver class. Yep. So they're not actually racing for within the same class, but they are racing for overall position within the race.
Right, and the class structures, obviously, for those that are relatively new to sports car racing, classes are basically you got a couple different races happening on the racetrack at the same time, and that means that you've got to share space with other competitors that are not necessarily in your race. It's just sort of condensing everybody that's in a similar car to a similar time period on the day. So the 93 is the only silver class car out there right now, that Racer's Edge car. The red on the timing and scoring, that is the Pro-Am category, which the DXCT Racing CrowdStrike cars are in. And you can see on the left-hand side, the 93 of Trent Hinman is closing in on the sister car, the 63, driven by Ryan Dial, as they come back across the line to start what I believe would be lap number 40. So it has been quite the day so far, down to the last 13 laps or so. And then when you go to get down to 10 to go, you start to realize how little time you have left to get positions. And for Trent Hinman, not for class position, but for overall position, he's going to feel the drive to go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trent and team were here, even though that they're the only one within their class, they were here for the overall win. And getting that penalty has actually made that pretty far out of reach unless they get a full force caution and get things tightened back up and then a good restart. But at this point in time, it looks a bit far-fetched for them to be able to do so. And Ryan and George seem to be running pretty consistent fast laps there. Actually, in the last lap was 4/10 faster than Trent. So they're moving along pretty good.
And they continue to run the sister cars for DXCT Racing, Kevin, continuously running very, very similar lap times, and those gaps staying very steady, as shown by the blue and white lines.
Well, exactly.
And,
to your
we've got
point
Ryan
there
down
about
the
not expecting to have to come back up through the field. Part of my conversation with Trent was about just how much fun this track is to drive, but the caveat was he wasn't really sure where you were going to be able to make passes. That was his concern. If he was in a position where he was going to have to knife his way through traffic, wasn't really sure where that was going to happen. I suspect he's working to figure that out pretty quick because it looks like he's reeling these two Mercedes in, but just where he can make that move stick, that's really the question here with 20 minutes remaining.
So Trent Hinman reeling in the DXCT Racing cars, but we were just talking during Ryan Marines interview there, guys, about the curbing in Turn 9. The discussion about how sharp the backside of it is. We saw a car take a little bit extra racetrack and maybe knock some dirt on course. Turn 9 entry. Obviously, the exit's got a nice wide berm, but the entry, though, how aggressive are you going to be with that? And is that a concern for cutting a tire?
Yeah, the berm there on the inside of 9, essentially the backside of the curbing is a flat, straight up section, and the worry is that you go across that, you could actually slice the tire. So normally when I was out there, and I'm sure Kevin as well, we stayed off of the backside of the curbing, made sure we were staying on the nice smooth front half of it. But you do want to get all of it without getting that back section. So it's a bit of a challenge, but you know, with these cars out there, you can see they're using up a good bit of the curbing in order to make sure they get the fastest lap time. So maybe the GT3 cars having bigger, thicker tires are more resilient to this. Pirelli makes a good tire, and obviously it's holding in there because we see the cars that are, you know, pounding through there pretty good.
Right, and tire pressure also plays a factor in that, Kevin. So if you're out on tires that aren't quite up to pressure yet, jumping a curb where you're basically squashing it is probably a higher risk than once you have the tires up to temp and pressure.
Right, and fortunately, this stint has been long enough that the tires are completely kind of stabilized from a pressure standpoint, and there's definitely enough for them to be using some curbs. So it's definitely a fine balance because you want to use as much curb as you can on the turns that you can, but you don't want to put your tire too much in the dirt because kind of picking up rocks and gravel and sand and stuff like that isn't necessarily good for the tire. So it's always a fine balance, and as a driver, sometimes your search for speed is so great that you disregard the durability side sometimes.
That's just a race car driver, and you just want to go fast all the time. We've taken a look at the lap times here. Colin Brown and Ryan Dial, both last time a 140.0 for Brown, a 140.3 for Dial, and both those drivers were quicker than the race leader right now. So this is one of those points in the race where you know, you might have some pretty sizable differences in lap times between drivers, but everyone's kind of established their space. And as the race leader, you kind of earn that right? You get out front and you can kind of back things off a little bit, run your own pace without the pressure behind. But if you're behind, you're going hard all the time to try to make up that ground.
Going hard, and the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that, especially at Sonoma, there is the possibility that someone goes off and you end up with a full course caution, which then pulls all the cars right together. And like you said, the two DXDT cars, you know, George's car with Colin Brown behind the wheel and Ryan Dial in David Askew's car, very much because of the pace they have, they may actually like to see a full course yellow in order to be able to pack up and then take a charge at it. But even with not, they're charging forward. Without a full course caution, there's too much time to make up before the end of the race. But they definitely are looking to move forward without a doubt.
And continue to watch Trent Hinman, who was in the race lead. They had that penalty for that pit stop infraction. Kevin, you were mentioning that you didn't think that car had the pace to get back by, and it doesn't look like, again, we've still got 16 minutes to go, but Hinman last time by was 10th quicker than Dial, but you're going to have to be faster than that to get by both the DXCT Racing cars.
Yeah, that won't be enough. That'll basically allow you to maintain your pace. If you're only a tenth faster, even if it's every single lap, there's not enough time left for that to make a big difference. And then really, once you get really close to the next car in front of you, if that's the difference in pace you have, it's going to be really difficult to pull off a pass at that point.
So getting into the last 15 or 16 minutes of this race, we've been out here for 1 hour and 14 as it stands. 7 drivers out on track now as the GT2s have pulled in. Caution, is that a full course or is that a sector flag? That's the question. It looks like it's a full course yellow, everything changes.
Absolutely, just like we were just talking about. I don't know what the cause is. Hopefully everybody's okay out there. But in the end, this is going to, provided that they're able to fix whatever's out there.
There would be your answer. I would assume that it's for debris.
Somebody's gone off and pulled dirt into the main line, and they don't want people to. Yeah, that's a bad place to have a lot of that stuff. All these guys are running through it, so hopefully their tires, as Kevin was talking about earlier, Hopefully their tires come back together. And what we're going to have here is, they'll go ahead, they'll clean this section of the track. They'll go ahead and pull all these cars close up together, and they'll have a restart. It'll be single file, so they'll all be lined up in the positions they are, but they're all going to be nose to tail. So here in a little while, once they get the track cleaned up, the safety car will come around onto the front straightaway, pull off, and then you're going to have, that's a mess there. We definitely don't want race cars with the tires you were just talking about going through there, because they're just going to be a bigger wreck after that. So they'll get that cleaned up, and it's a shame that these guys are still running through there.
Yeah, they spread it all out, it'll make it harder to clean up.
Spread it out, and the possibility of there being tire failures based upon that here, even on the restart or as they're driving around, is a good possibility. So, but on a restart, they'd go ahead and line up and come around the front straightaway, throw the green flag. You're not able to pass until you get to the start-finish line, but you can start to set yourself up to pass, and then you're going to have a dogfight that goes up into turn 2 and 3, because all of these cars are going to be stacked on top of each other. All of these drivers are pros, and if there's any bit of a gap, they're going to put their nose in there, and it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. And like we were saying, George and Ryan, or excuse me, Colin and Ryan, both have cars that were showing to be 5 or 6 tenths faster than even the leaders. One of the things I will say is that James Safranis, who knows this track very well, at this race last year, I think was in 4th or 5th place when the double yellow flag came out, and he proved to be able to work the traffic and ended up winning this race. And Bleakmolen, his pro counterpart, is the one that's out there this time. So we'll see how he does, dive bombing his way through 1, 2, and 3.
Well, Sonoma's looking a little dusty out there right now as the crew cleans up turn 9A right now as we wait for the green flag to come back out again. And just got to clean this up, re-rack him and restack him, Kevin. But put me in the mindset of a driver. You're going to have less than 10 minutes to go, probably more like 6 or 7 by the time this is cleaned up and we get a chance to restart. If you're Colin Brown and you're sitting 3rd right now, you're sitting on a podium already, are you willing to risk making a dive up the inside for 2nd or for that top spot? Or are you okay with 3rd?
Well, I'm sure Colin was on the radio as soon as the yellow came out, and he wanted to know what his lap times were compared to the cars ahead and behind. So he knew Ryan Dial was running very similar times behind him, but his cars in 1st and 2nd, if he was running faster times, now he knows that he might have an opportunity to pass now that the cars are getting bunched up. So there's definitely one car in class out of class that's in front of Colin. So that's the one wild card that he wants to get by that car so that he can make an attempt to get even higher on the podium.
Well, look after the pit stops, guys. You see, again, we're comparing all this to Colin Brown's pace, but look just after the 24 pit here, where the red bubble is. Look right above this. The blue line is Colin Brown. The green is the number 14, the 2nd place car. That's Jerome Bleakmolen. And the yellow was Trent Hinman, who's obviously come on and hit pit lane already. But my question becomes, actually, that might be the one car, it looks like, the orange is. So that's to the race leader. So look at how these lines have actually come closer to Colin Brown as the pace went on. Brown was reeling in those leaders a little bit. So it might have been by a couple tenths a lap, but you give him 3 or 4 laps to go for it. And I think the Browns at least got a shot. He was definitely quicker before the caution came out.
So yeah, back to your question as to whether he's going to be willing to take a 3rd and try to defend against that. Now, Colin, Ryan, every one of these drivers out here are all going for it. They're all going for the win. They're not going for 2nd or 3rd. They're going to try to win this race. We've seen it time and time again with these pros. This is going to be a great shootout to see who actually puts the car out front. It's one of the things we were talking about earlier is how the different cars make speed, and you get into the situation where they're trying to make speed, and I don't know if we're getting ready to go green here, getting close to it yet. But different cars make speed different ways. The cars that are faster on the straightaway are going to be the ones that are going to try to get away, during on the straight, and then we're going to turn around and have George and Ryan, or excuse me, Colin and Ryan, that are out there trying to get around, going up to the top of 1 into 2, and in that area. So it's going to be a dogfight, and everybody's going to be looking to try to get an advantage. So the leader of the race there in the Ferrari will be the one, once the pace car pulls off, it will set the pace, and the leader gets the opportunity to, once they get into the restart zone, to choose when to start. You have that restart zone, the big Geico blue section that's out there on the walls, and once he gets into that space, he can go to the throttle anywhere that he wants. If he doesn't go to the throttle before you get to the end of that, then they'll throw the green flag.
So we have less than 10 minutes to go. It's the one of Rodrigo Baptista for Squadra Corsa Racing in the Ferrari 488 GT3. Right behind them, Jerome Bleekemolen in the GMG Racing 911 GT3R. And then in third in class is Colin Brown, but he's fourth in line as we come out of turn number 11 into 12. And with 9.5 minutes to go, green flag back in the air as we rumble up to turn number 1, and a good clean getaway for the Squadra Corsa car. And big drive up the inside for the third place overall car in the dirt as they head for turn number 2, but Bleekemolen holds on as they come out of turn number 2. That was a wild restart there, and you see Colin Brown got the team car in behind Trent Hinman, behind the 63, which is being driven by Ryan Dial, but Dial going to try to maybe play rear gunner for Brown just a little bit here, CJ.
Yeah, obviously the last thing they want is the Acura to get in and get around, and then both Ryan and Colin have to deal with them. I think it's one of those things that Colin's focused forward. You can see he's moving up on the Porsche there. Whoa, just slightly crossed the nose, but that's where he's fast, so that's where he has to go. Porsche's pretty good through there as well.
Yeah, big moment as he had the rear end sliding up from underneath him through turn number 5. Now a big dive up the outside to try to cross up on exit, take a bunch of curb. You see the rear end still sliding out in that car. Traction control rumbling through the steering wheel there as he comes out of turn 7A and now down through the S's here, Kevin. And the race is on. This car in front of him is Root and not a class competitor. So that's just for overall position. He needs to get by him if he wants to catch Bleekemolen for second.
Right, I think Root wants some bragging rights to be able to stay in front of Colin, but Colin wants to get by as fast as he can so that he can challenge for the win. So it's definitely a close battle, and just looking at this first lap right here, it looks like Colin's just a little bit faster on the first half of the track. So definitely curious if he can get by.
I'm sure race control is about ready to take all the hard cards away from these guys as they came through turn 9, knocking the dirt back onto the racetrack. But with 7.5 minutes to go, the 63 and the DXCT Racing car driven by Ryan Dial still is in front of Trent Hinman, who was the race leader before a penalty put him back. And they're all sitting behind Rodrigo Baptista and Bleekemolen and Root in that blue and white Porsche. Colin Brown was attacking that car a lap ago, couldn't get the power to the ground after going the long way around the carousel and lining up another move here as Bleekemolen seems a little off the pace here heading down through this first sector here, CJ, and maybe that's going to cause a stack up in behind him.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a bit of a stack up, and I think this has some to do with where cars are good and where they aren't, but also having all these cars so close together. You were talking earlier about the aero advantages, and when you get that many cars together, except for on a long straightaway, the turbulence is taking away a good bit of the aero advantage from these cars.
Into turn 6 right now. You can see the lap chart after they caution everyone back together, and now they're growing again. The one car pulling away while the second place fight heats up behind them. Root really starting to be the cork in the bottle, as John Heinhoff would say, as they come down through the S's here, Kevin.
Right, you can see him doing a little bit of defending, kind of pulling to the center of the track in some of the brake zones and trying to make it really hard for Colin to get an advantage. So I think he knows that he's not the fastest car out there right now.
Well, I don't know if SRO America has an off-road category, but I think we should add one, or at least maybe put a big anti-cut curb on the inside. There already is sort of an anti-cut curb, but they're going to cut it regardless. And now Bleekemolen starting to become a part of this dogfight for second, but the one car, Baptista, he is gone, taking that opportunity. You look in the mirror, you see the second place car being sort of a rolling chicane, and that's his get up and go maneuver. He's gone now with 6 minutes to go.
Yeah, we have Root here. That's the gotcha when you have a race that you have multi-classes and stuff like that. Root's actually running for the AM class, but he's also obviously looking at the overall ranking. And right now it would be great to be able to have Colin and Ryan up there with Bleekemolen to have a nice pro-am battle. But with Root right there in the middle, it's a little bit challenging.
And you can see that growth happen there as the 14 car. Bleekemolen is a second place car, Kevin, and you can see how that gap has stayed fairly constant to Colin Brown in the blue, but the orange line of the number 1 has pulled away. So Ryan Diall in behind, losing a little bit of time a lap ago, but now closed right to the tailpipes of the sister car as they head through 7A.
Right, it really looks like that's the worst turn for Root right now. Everybody seems to really close up on the back of his car through that section, and then he stretches it out just a little bit through the rest of the lap. So it's definitely, here you're seeing some places where maybe the Porsche is a little bit better here and the Mercedes is better there. So that's one thing that you have to kind of battle with through the end of the race as we go through the final 5 minutes.
Less than 5 minutes to go. Max Root from Wright Motorsports and poured out in that car earlier. They switched about the halfway point, and now driving for his life right now, trying to hold those other cars in behind. And I believe he's the only car in that class still rolling. That would be the GT3 AM class, and there's only one of those cars out there. But again, overall position, of course, it's going to matter as you look up the inside there by the Trent Hinman machine on the back of the 63 of Ryan Diall.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that Max Root has to watch out for is he's battling so well amongst all of these pros. He may end up getting promoted such that he is a pro in the future, and they'll be running Pro-Am as well, because obviously the pace both from his teammate and himself is, got him 3rd overall in a battle that he's holding his own for sure.
So Kevin, watching this as a driver, you've been in this position before where you've got kind of a stack up in front of you. How difficult is it to take advantage of drivers in this position? If you're sitting 4th or 5th in line like Trent Hinman is, how do you make something out of this? All right, you've got a line of cars in front of you, but it seems like everyone's sort of stuck right here.
Yeah, it's really tough because all these cars are grouped so close together that if you make a really bold move, then that may open you up to get past from someone behind. So you end up having to be just a little bit more conservative than you would be if it was just you and the other car that you're battling with. It's definitely a tough thing out there, and when we look at the lap times, they're actually running about 2 seconds slower than they were before the yellow. So I think that gives it just a little bit of a peek into how much they're being held up right now just by running this close together.
You see times in the mid 141s, the best time of the day for at least Trent Hinman, who is currently the quickest driver of the day and would end up with the fastest lap award. Would be 139.158 for the number 93. So again, there's one of these in every single category. But that's just for the GT3 Silver. So for the GT3 Pro-Am, it would be Ryan Diall with that award right now, 139.446. That's purple right here on the bottom right of your screen. As soon as I try to highlight that, everything highlights, but you can see the purple there on the bottom right as Colin Brown starts to drop off the back of the Porsche, and it seems like the gaps are starting to grow a little bit. We'll take a look at the lap chart, and you can start to see the growth happening there between the blue line is brown again, and they're all diverging a little bit, so everyone finding their own space to race.
Yeah, when you're racing this tight together for that period of time, obviously keeping his nose stuck underneath the Porsche, it does take a little bit of a toll, obviously, on the downforce of the splitter, and you start to have the tires go off just a bit. So it's challenging, and that's why multi-class racing is always fun. But I think they're all out there, giving it their all. There definitely wasn't anybody, Colin for sure, that was like, okay, it's good enough to take a 3rd place, because I know Colin very well, and the only thing he wants to do is win.
That's why they're in race cars. But this battle per second still not completely over yet, bouncing over the curves through 9A. About a minute and a half left. This should be white flag this time by, as looks like Rodrigo Baptista is going to roll through turn number 11 and has established a sizable lead now, and just all out the windshield now, Kevin. As a race car driver, all you want to see is that white flag with no one behind you. It looks like that's what Baptista's about to see.
Right, especially when you see that white flag and you have a gap, it's kind of nice because you don't have to take any risks on this lap. You can kind of just hit the marks and do what you've been doing for the last hour and a half and just make it to the finish. For the guys that are battling for position in this group here, it's a little bit different because everybody wants to maximize their result for the race today. So their work isn't done, and they're being just as aggressive as they would be at the beginning of the race.
So for second, there's still a battle going on for Baptista. Again, this is all about execution in these races, right? Obviously, the start of the race, it was Shelby Blackstock and Trent Hinman who had control of this by a sizable margin. But all that margin disappeared with one mistake, coming into the pits too early, receiving a stop and go. Actually, it wasn't a stop and go, a stop and hold penalty down on pit lane, and that put them back. So while the 93 might have been the fastest car of the day, it's not the one that's going to end up winning the race here, guys. So the DXTT Racing car is executing very well within their own class, and Colin Brown is going to end up on the podium here if he can just hang on. It's going to be one of these two cars, provided that they don't end up together in turn 9A, but you never know until it's over. Root hanging on nicely in third overall as they head down into 9 right now, but in Bleekemolen, with the struggles after the restart, has held on quite nicely, and provided he can get through here nice and cleanly, he should be able to hang on to second. Last sector here for the race leader, Rodrigo Baptista from the Squadra Corsa team. Martin Fuentes started in that car, followed the 93 Acura NSX for the majority of the race until the pit stop sequence, where it was just that one mistake, pitting too early, that took the 93 out and put the 1 car right out front. Race win for Rodrigo Baptista and Martin Fuentes in Squadra Corsa. They win at Sonoma Raceway in GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS, sponsored by CrowdStrike. Jerome Bleekemolen going to bring home second place, with Root in behind, then Colin Brown on podium, and Ryan Dial rounding out a top 5 overall. Good run for the DXTT Racing boys. And for Hinman and Blackstock, a missed opportunity there, CJ.
Yeah, that's it's always gut-wrenching to lose based upon a penalty, but obviously allowing them to pit before everybody else would have been a big advantage for them, and that doesn't make sense. We've I think George and Colin will be very pleased with the podium, and I think Ryan and David Askew in the 63 car will be reasonably happy with their performance as well today. I think both of the Mercedes, both of the DXDT Mercedes teams did very well. A very tricky track, and they were out there and ran pretty consistent pace between the two cars, which is good.
We saw also that Trent Hinman is going to be awarded the Every Second Counts Fastest Lap Award, brought to you by CrowdStrike. That time was a 1:39.158, quickest lap of the day in GT3. That's a pretty quick lap around here. We're going to step away in just a moment. We'll be right back to wrap things up, but we'll have a word from CrowdStrike before post-race interviews in just a few moments.
When we first looked at the opportunity of working with CrowdStrike as a technical partner and as our security partner, we knew it would help us in this world that we live in today, but we didn't realize how much it would help us to be secure in a post-COVID environment, or as we have to exist today, as we all say, it's a new normal that we have to operate on. When we were very impressed with CrowdStrike, with the ability to quickly respond in seconds to threats, that's been a great aspect of our partnership.
Hello, I'm CJ Moses, the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer for Amazon Web Services. Coming on as title sponsor with the SRO has allowed us to create new innovation, to use our technologies in ways they've never been used before. The cloud is very capable. All of these 195 services that we offer provide vast different capabilities, but customers come up with even better ways to use it than we ever thought of. In the case of the SRO, we're going to be bringing better experiences through to the TV itself. Second screen experiences where we're going to be doing a lot of predictive analytics and things like that. These are the types of things that we want to see our customers from AWS actually do, and by partnering with the SRO, we're introducing it to a whole new venue and to sports cars. We're bringing a lot of excitement to it as well. And when you have excited fans that are getting a better experience and we're able to showcase the technology that AWS has doing that, I think it's a win-win for SRO, for us, and for the fans that are actually engaged in the watching of the event.
Out there in a sandwich between two big names in sports car racing, Colin Brown and Jerome Bleekemolen. What was that like for you? Was it a bit of a pinch me moment to be racing with those guys?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why we're here. We're trying to shoot for overall podiums, and the Wright Motorsports car is fantastic today, so big ups to the guys. Couldn't have done it without them, and we had an opportunity, so we went for it.
Yeah, you certainly did. Well done, and we'll go ahead and have Fred step in if we could get Fred's attention. Fred, we'll have you step in. Max, you can step aside. Congratulations, an overall podium in GT3 competition.
Thank you.
How special is this achievement?
Oh, this was really great. You know, we were really disappointed about things that happened at VIR to us, just out of our control. So we were really happy about today, and a little bit of a surprise, you know, a little bit of a gift to us with one of the cars having to serve a penalty. But yeah, we're very excited, very happy, and really shout out to our team. They gave us the car to be able to do it.
And you got another race to do it again tomorrow. Best of luck. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Phenomenal pros.
So thanks, Ryan Marine, for taking us down for the interviews on the paddock area. But let's talk about the end of the race here, guys. That was a pretty wild one. I wasn't really expecting a full course yellow to happen, but it sure did, and it was pretty wild when they got things re-racked and restacked off the run up to turn one. But CJ, nothing really changed from there. It was really just restart, follow the leader. They were trying to do something, but too afraid that if they did something wrong, they'd get passed by 5 other cars.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to pass here at Sonoma in general, and with these cars as closely, set up or closely, the balance of power.
Well, second win on the season, but this time an overall win for Rodrigo Baptista and Martin Fuentes. Rodrigo, I'm sure that yellow flag was not what you were hoping to see. What were you focusing on that restart to make sure that you could hold the lead?
Yeah, so for sure I didn't want the safety cars come in. We had a big gap for the second place. And I was just trying to keep the pressure on the tires. And when the safety car came out, I was hoping to the bad guys to start fighting, and I think they did that. So it was good. We had a great car.
Really well done. Congratulations to you, Rodrigo. We'll have you step over to the side, and we'll bring in Martin. Martin, how about this co-driver of yours? He might not say a whole lot, but he speaks quite loudly as far as his driving is concerned.
No. Rodrigo did a great job. I mean, we were actually stressed out when the yellow flag we've been struggling the whole weekend on the pace. But when the yellow flag came out, we were all stressed out. But he did a great job, and we're happy. We're back in the lead on the championship.
Your day started with you facing the wrong way with a problem in qualifying. Could you have imagined it would have ended with an overall win?
No, we changed a lot of things on the car because we were bottoming out tough on turn 1, and the engineer changed a lot of things, and the car was a lot better for the race, and just happy to be back in the top spot.
Big win today. Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan, and we're just about ready to wrap things up here at Sonoma. A beautiful afternoon, just after 3:30 here on the Pacific Coast. However, on the East Coast, where I'm from, it's about dinner time out there. So I'm still getting used to that, guys. But a great race we saw today. The DXCT Racing cars, the CrowdStrike livery, Colin Brown with teammate George Kurtz. They had a really solid run. Podium for GT3 Pro-Am CJ, so a good day for them. And also for the sister car. Ryan Dial brought that car home in fourth place in class, 5th overall. So a good day for those guys.
Yeah, definitely a good day for DXCT and CrowdStrike Racing as a whole. Anytime you're on the podium, it's a good thing. Obviously, we all as racers want to be on the top step of the podium, but on those days where you're not on the top step, it just gives you more fire for the next day. And the good thing is that tomorrow we do have another shot at it. Colin and George will be back out there along with David Askew and Ryan Dial, giving it another shot. And with everything they've learned today, they'll make some changes to the car and set up and go out there and make it another battle.
So with another race tomorrow, guys, we'll be right back here. I think we're on at 1:05 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. Guys, thanks so much for joining us today. And again, thanks to CrowdStrike for providing, and AWS for providing the partnership that has allowed us to have access to all this great data, and P1TS for letting us take a pretty deep dive into the telemetry. And I know you guys both spent a lot of time in the race car. And Kevin, what was it like to see all this data from the driver's perspective and seeing how much we can know about how off track you're going in some of those sectors?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I'm curious what it would take to get this in my car to where I could look at it while I'm driving. But maybe I wouldn't be able to pay enough attention to the track if I did that. But this data is really, really great to really know how you're performing on track.
It really is cool. And again, thanks to CrowdStrike and AWS. Of course, CrowdStrike is the official internet and cloud security provider of SRO America and is the presenting sponsor of the Sonoma Race Weekend. There'll be a lot more of this tomorrow afternoon. For now, my name is Kyle Heyer with CJ Moses and Kevin Boehm. We'll see you on Sunday, 1:05 tomorrow afternoon. Thanks so much.